This is Senator Bade, a prominent politician with high prospects. His body was found unalive in his hotel room the morning after a night of heated argument in the middle of a lavish party organized by his lovely wife to celebrate his 60th birthday. The killer must be found and justice must be served. But the question is this: who would want him dead, and why? The problem is this again: everybody around him wants him dead. Let's go back to how it started. Senator Bade is a powerful and influential figure in the Senate House of Representatives. Wealth and ambition have paved his path to success, and he dreams of one day becoming the president of the country. People address him simply as Senator, a title that commands respect wherever he goes. And his wealth and connections has made him untouchable in the eyes of many. Married to Irene, the senator has two children: Wale, his 27-year-old son, and Moyo, his 24-year-old daughter. But the story of Moyo is quite complicated, and we will uncover that later. Despite his success and the image of a dedicated family man, Senator Bade has a major flaw: his insatiable desire for women. To him, every woman is a prize to be won, a challenge to be conquered. His affairs were numerous, and he goes out of his way to keep these women satisfied. Ironically, the only woman who seemed to be left out of his affection is his wife, Irene. On the surface, Irene is the picture of elegance and grace. A beautiful woman who smiles politely at social gatherings, never letting on that anything might be wrong. But behind closed doors, her life is filled with pain and sorrow. Every day, she carries the weight of her husband's coldness and infidelity. Irene knows about the countless women her husband chases, yet she stays. Not because she loves him, but because she feels she has no choice. But there is something more, a terrible secret from her past that keeps her bound to Senator Bade. She believes that this sin she had committed years ago is the reason for the harsh words and occasional beatings she endures. Irene feels that living would destroy her husband's career, and that would be unacceptable. She has become an expert at hiding her suffering, playing the role of the perfect wife, even if it costs her happiness. She cannot afford to jeopardize her husband's presidential ambitions, even though the cost of her own well-being grows heavier by the day. Wale, the senator's first and only son, is a mirror image of his father. Physically, he is tall, handsome and confident, carrying the charm that comes with being the son of a wealthy and influential man. But beneath his exterior lies a deep resentment. Wale has grown up watching his father's cruelty towards his mother. Her pain, her tears, the bruises she hides so well. He has witnessed Senator Bade's reckless affairs and utter disregard for his family's well-being. The older he grew, the more Wale's hatred for his father intensified. He despises everything his father stands for, especially his treatment of his mother. While he shares his father's looks, Wale swears he will never share his values. To him, Senator Bade is a man with wealth and power, but without a heart. Moyo's birth is wrapped in a mystery that casts a long shadow over her life. She is Irene's second child and only daughter, but there is a dark secret hidden beneath the surface, one that even Moyo herself knows nothing about. To the world, she is the beloved daughter of Senator Bade, but there is one person who knows the truth: the senator. He is painfully aware that Moyo is not his biological daughter, though he pretends otherwise for the sake of appearances. The irony is this: Senator Bade has no idea who Moyo's real father is. It's a secret that Irene has guarded fiercely for years, a truth she has vowed never to reveal, not to her husband and certainly not to Moyo. Irene is determined to take the secret with her to the grave, no matter the cost. Moyo is a strikingly beautiful 24-year-old woman with dreams of becoming a lawyer. Her intelligence and quiet confidence made her a rising star in her law school before tragedy struck. Just a few months ago, she was involved in a horrific car accident which left her temporarily paralyzed, now confined to a wheelchair. Right from when she was a little girl, Moyo was known to be bright and adorable. A little girl who loved to be happy and loved to play. But as she neared adolescence, her personality started to change. Moyo suddenly became quiet and introverted. She often faded into the background, almost invisible in social settings. There is only one person who brings light into her life: her best friend, Moi. Moi and Moyo find comfort and reason to smile together, something rare in her otherwise lonely world. Moi is the only person who understands her and doesn't treat her like she's fragile or broken. Together, they share a bond that keeps Moyo going. Moi is the stunning and ambitious daughter of Kunle Badmus, Senator Bade's lifelong best friend. The bond between their families runs deep, built on years of friendship, trust, and shared experiences. As children, Moi and Moyo were inseparable. From the time they were toddlers, they formed a bond that grew stronger with each passing year. But there was one secret Moi carried. A secret she had discovered by accident when they were just 12 years old. That night, they had planned a fun sleepover at Moyo's house. But as the evening began to wear on, Moi became hungry. So she quietly left their room to grab some snacks from the kitchen. The house was quiet, but as she walked down the hallway, she suddenly heard raised voices coming from Senator Bade's bedroom. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she tiptoed closer, careful not to make a sound. The argument between Senator Bade and Irene was fierce. Moi pressed her ear to the door, her heart pounding as she listened to words she would never forget. "I don't understand how I'm supposed to take care of your bastard daughter with my hard-earned money. And yet, I can't even know who her real father is. Irene, what do you take me for?" Senator Bade's voice was thick with anger. "Moyo is not a bastard, Bade." Irene's voice shot back, sharp and ringing with emotion. "She is my daughter. She is mine, and that's all that matters." Moi froze in shock, her hands trembling. Senator Bade wasn't Moyo's father. How could that be? Moyo did not know. No one did. Moi stood there in disbelief, her world spinning. She did not hear the rest of the argument because all she could think about was her best friend. The secret was too big, too heavy, but Muyi knew she could not tell anyone, not even Moyo. She vowed that night to keep the truth hidden no matter what. She couldn't bear the thought of her friend being hurt or sad, and so she buried the secret deep within her heart. Now years have passed, and Muyi had grown into a confident, successful young woman. She had recently begun her law practice at one of the fastest rising firms in the country, and her future looked bright. Her parents adore her, always proud of their ambitious daughter, and her fiancé, Emma, loved her with a devotion that made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. Everything in Muyi's life was perfect. Muyi stood behind her desk, tidying up her office in preparation for the weekend. The space wasn't large, but it had become her little haven after a long and exhausting week. She could not wait to get home, where a relaxing weekend with her fiancé Emma awaited. The thought of him always brought a warm smile to her face. Absent-mindedly, her fingers reached for the delicate diamond necklace resting on her neck, the one with her name engraved in a beautiful script. Emma had given it to her on her 24th birthday, a symbol of his love. But the smile quickly faded as something she had pushed to the back of her mind all week crept back in. Today was Senator Bade's 60th birthday, and there was a grand dinner party later that night in his mansion. Muyi frowned. Deep down, she couldn't understand that man. She avoided being alone with him as much as she could. Senator Bade had a reputation that made her skin crawl, always chasing after women, and no matter how many times she said no, his advances towards her never stopped. He was persistent, shameless, and powerful, and that combination made him dangerous. Muyi let out a deep breath. This is a party with lots of people, she told herself. You'll be fine. Just smile, be polite, and get through the night. Missing the event wasn't an option for her. Her parents would never forgive her for skipping such an important occasion, and besides, she needed to be there for Moyo. Putting on her best smile, Muyi grabbed her bag and straightened her posture, walking through the office ready to face the evening with renewed determination. Muyi stepped into the grand hall, radiating elegance and beauty. The hall was an extension of Senator Bade's mansion, a space reserved for lavish events that flaunted his wealth and influence. Tonight, the place was decorated to perfection, shimmering under the glow of chandeliers, with extravagant floral arrangements and rich velvet drapes. The aura of luxury was unmistakable. This was a room filled with power and affluence. She took a quick glance around the room, then turned her eyes towards Emma, who stood beside her, holding her hand protectively. There is not a single poor man in this room, Muyi remarked under her breath. Emma chuckled softly. Come on, Muyi, don't be dramatic. You're not exactly poor yourself. Muyi shook her head, her lips pressed in a tight line. You are missing the point, Emma. She sighed, her tone laced with frustration. You know what? Forget it. Sensing her tension, Emma squeezed her hand gently. Relax, barrister. We are here to have fun, remember? Let's not argue. Muyi's smile returned, softer this time. You're right. She scanned the room. I need to find Moyo, she said, excusing herself. I'll be back soon." As Moyi gracefully made her way through the crowd, she smiled and exchanged polite greetings with the guests, her eyes constantly searching for her best friend. She soon spotted her parents seated close to Senator Bade and his family. Her mother beamed with pride and her father waved cheerfully. Irene, as usual, looked stunning, her perfect smile masking whatever emotions lay beneath the surface. They exchanged pleasantries, but Moyi did not linger. She knew that Moyo wouldn't be sitting at that table for long, not with her father nearby. Senator Bade had a way of making everyone uncomfortable, but with Moyo there was a deep resentment that Moyi had never quite understood. Moyo hated her father more than anyone, even more than Moyi did. There was something darker in Moyo's loathing, something Moyi couldn't quite put her finger on. Moyi looked at her friend sitting at the far end of the table, looking as though she'd rather be anywhere else. And without a word, she wheeled Moyo's chair away from the formalities of the head table, guiding her towards the quieter, more comfortable space where Emma was waiting. They did not need to speak to understand each other. Tonight wasn't about celebrating Senator Bade for them. It was about getting through the evening together like they always had. The party was in full swing, a grand display of wealth and status. The guests arrived dressed to impress, each one trying to outshine the other with their expensive clothes and glittering jewelry. The air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses and conversation. But for Moyi, the crowd was becoming suffocating. She hated being in large groups. The noise, the constant chatter, it was all too much. The grandness of the events that others enjoyed so much only made her feel trapped. Feeling the walls closing in, Moyi excused herself from the table, saying something about needing to freshen up. She quickly made her way to the restroom, grateful to find it empty. The quiet was a relief, a moment to breathe and collect herself, away from the chaos of the party. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection, trying to calm the racing thoughts. But then, the door creaked open. Moyi's heart skipped a beat. She turned her eyes, widening in disbelief. It was Senator Bade. He walked in casually, shutting and locking the door behind him with a click. Her heart began to pound. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of shock and anger. "How shameless can you be, Senator? Everyone is here to celebrate you, to honor you on your 60th birthday. Worse still, your wife is just a few meters away from here, and this is what you choose to do? To think you're my father's best friend, someone I grew up seeing as a father, makes this whole thing disgusting." Senator Bade laughed, a low mocking sound that echoed in the small restroom. "Oh, Moyi, don't be uptight. I love you. I've always loved you. Let me take care of you, spoil you, take you to places you've never been." Moyo's stomach churned. She had heard this all before, and each time it disgusted her even more. "Stop it, Senator," she cut him off sharply, her voice cold as ice. "I've told you no countless times. How can you not get that into your head? This is the last time I'll have this conversation with you. The next time you try this, I'll tell my father everything." Her words cut like a knife, but Senator Bade wasn't backing down. His face twisted with anger as she moved towards the door. In a sudden move, he grabbed her arm, his grip firm and possessive. But Muyi was faster. With a surge of adrenaline, she shoved him, his hold breaking as she made for the door. She hurried back to the party, her mind racing, desperate to put some distance between herself and him. But when she reached their table, Emma was gone. Her heart sank. "Where is Emma?" she asked Moyo, trying to keep her voice steady. Moyo shrugged, a puzzled look crossing her face. "He left a few minutes ago." He looked upset. Muyi's eyes scanned the room. "Upset? Why? What happened?" "I have no idea." He said nothing. Moyo paused, looking at her friend with concern. "Where is your necklace?" Muyi's hand flew to her neck, her fingers searching for the familiar weight of the diamond necklace Emma had given her. But it wasn't there. Her heart dropped. How bad could this evening get? Without answering Moyo, she rushed back to the restroom, hoping she had just dropped it in her hurry to leave. But when she scoured the floor and counters, there was no sign of the necklace. Her mind raced. Senator Bade must have taken it. Of course, he would try something like this. Use the necklace as bait to lure her into another trap. But she would not fall for it. She needed to find Emma, and fast. He must have seen Senator Bade follow her into the restroom, and now he was gone, probably thinking the worst. She had to explain to clear things up before it was too late. But as she stepped out of the restroom, ready to search for him, a loud commotion erupted in the hall. Muyi's heart raced as she made her way towards the noise, her thoughts swirling with fear. What could have gone wrong? Wale, Senator Bade's first son, burst into the room, his voice booming over the music. The sharpness of his tone cut through the air, silencing the band as everyone turned to face him. His disheveled appearance and the smell of alcohol were enough to make it clear that he wasn't in his right mind. But Wale did not care about the stares or the whispers. All his rage was directed at one man, his father. He stormed down the hall, ignoring the crowd of guests who sat frozen, watching the unfolding drama. His anger flared with every sharp step until he was standing right in front of Senator Bade. His voice was full of venom as he began to rant. "How dare you, father? How dare you bring your mistress into our family business? Isn't it bad enough that you've embarrassed us for years and we've kept quiet just to protect your precious political career? You disrespect our mother, you treat her like dirt, and we say nothing, all for the sake of your ambition. And now you bring your bird-brained mistress and make her the general manager. How? And you expect me to answer to her just because you want her in your bed whenever you feel like it?" The guests sat in stunned silence, eyes widening with every word Wale spat. No one dared move. Even Irene, the senator's wife, looked like she had been turned to stone in her seat. "This is the height of it, father," Wale continued, his voice shaking with rage. "This family has had enough of your fields. My mother has endured more than any woman should. I won't stand by and watch you destroy her and this family." With that, Wale turned on his heel, ready to leave. But before he could take a step, Senator Bade's voice thundered across the room, stopping him cold. "If you take one more step, Wale, you will cease to be my son, and I will be dead to you." The room held its breath. For a moment, all was still as Wale turned back, staring his father straight into his eyes. His words, cold and cutting, sliced through the tension in the room. "I wish you were dead already." There was a gasp from the crowd. Never had anyone seen such hatred in a son for his father. Senator Bade's face twisted in fury. He couldn't believe the disrespect. "You come into my party, my celebration, and try to humiliate me like this?" His voice grew louder as he pointed an accusing finger towards Irene. "You think your mother is innocent? Do you know how much I have sacrificed? I have spent the last 24 years of my life caring for a daughter that is not even mine? And I am the heartless one? She sneaks around with other men, gets pregnant, and brings the child home without knowing who the father is, and I am the irresponsible one?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Eyes darted from the senator to Irene, disbelief spreading across the room. But before anyone could react further, Irene shot to her feet, her face flushed with anger and shame. "Oh, stop it, Bade," she shouted, her voice breaking. "It's your fault any of this happened in the first place. You abandoned me. You left me alone with our 3-year-old son and ran off to God knows where, doing God knows what. I am not a loose woman, and you know it. You're only saying this to make me look as bad as you are. Sleeping with Kunle was a mistake." The words were out before she could catch herself. It hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. The once quiet room descended into chaos. Guests murmured and gasped in shock, their eyes darting back and forth between Irene and the senator. Irene's confession had hit them all like a slap in the face. Almost everyone was holding their phones up, capturing the entire scandal. It was no longer a private affair. This family drama was about to become a public spectacle. Wale looked at his mother, equally shocked by her admission. The hall, filled with laughter and celebration moments ago, now felt like the setting of a tragic play, unraveling in real time. "This party is over. Everyone out," Senator Bade shouted, his head still reeling from what he had just heard. He sat down on the closest seat he could grab as his security men ushered the guests out. He could not believe that his best friend Kunle was Moyo's father. He looked at his wife. "So you shamelessly slept with my best friend and hid it away from me all these years. And then the both of you smile in my face, knowing what you have done, knowing you have both betrayed me. I asked you countless times and you said you had no idea who it was, Irene." Irene was already in tears where she sat. This was exactly the kind of scene she had wanted to avoid. "I did not want to cause any problems between the both of you. It was just one night. When you left, I was so depressed. He was the only one I could turn to. We got carried away one night and it happened. I did not even tell him I was pregnant." Kunle stood in stunned silence, his face covered with shame. Even though he had confessed to his wife a few days after the incident, he always knew that what happened that day would come back to bite him. And he truly had no idea that they had made a baby that night. He turned towards his wife, his eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed his hand in a reassuring manner. From when Moyo had turned 3, She had suspected that her husband was Moyo's father. They looked so much alike when she smiled, but she did not want to dig into the matter, so she let sleeping dogs lie. Now the dogs were awake. "I think we should leave this place," she whispered to her husband. The couple looked at their daughter and saw the disappointment in her eyes. She was standing beside Moyo, who was crying uncontrollably. Staying there would only make matters worse, so they quietly walked away and no one stopped them. Senator looked around the quiet room. Everyone was silent, alone with their own thoughts. He needed space. He needed to process this new piece of information, and so he too walked away, leaving his family behind. Wale looked at his mother, his face expressionless. "Is this why you stayed with him? So that you can protect your secret?" he asked. Irene shook her head. "I wanted a stable life for you and your sister, and he wanted a stable family to help boost his political ambition. We were helping each other." "That does not still give him the right to treat you the way he did," Wale said stubbornly. "I hate him so much." "Stop it, Wale. He is still your father, and you had no right crashing this party in the manner you did. I'm sure that by now, our business is all over the internet," she chastised calmly. "I'm sorry, mother. I don't feel bad for him one bit. I meant what I said before. He is dead to me," Wale said, his tone icy, and then he got up and walked out of the room. Mother and daughter looked at each other. Moyo was hurting so bad. She had endured a lot over the years. She had gone through things that she could not dare open up to anyone about. It all made sense to her now. That was why Senator treated her the way he did. He never saw her as his own child. Irene walked toward her daughter and sat facing her. "I'm really sorry about all of this, Moyo. I did not plan for you to find out this way." "No, mother. You did not plan for me to find out at all. How could you keep such a secret?" she interrupted. Irene's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" Moyo interrupted again. "You have no idea the things I went through in the hands of that man. And there was no one to protect me. While you all slept, every night was a complete torture for me, and I could not tell anyone about it. So tell me, mother, how have you protected me? I have always doubted that he was my father, because how can a father be that callous?" She got up from her wheelchair, and the other women gasped in shock. "This chair is what has protected me since these past few months. He had the decency to leave me alone since the accident, and I have been afraid to let anyone know I could walk again." Irene's heart broke to a million pieces. Bade had crossed the line this time. She would endure anything from him. She would endure anything he did to her, but not when he touched her children. "I'm sorry, my baby. I'm really sorry," she said, getting up to hold her daughter close. "I'll make things right. I promise." Muyi could not hold back the tears any longer. She had no idea that her friend had gone through these bad things. It pained her that she had hidden the truth from her friend, who she just recently discovered was her sister, for this long. Irene left the younger women alone in the hall. She had had enough for one night, She needed to think and re-strategize for the sake of her children. Moyo and Muyi stood facing each other. "I'm glad to see you are back on your feet," Muyi said, offering her a warm smile. Moyo, though still shaking, smiled a bit. "I guess we are sisters after all." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Moyo spoke up. "How come you don't look as surprised as we all are, Muyi?" The question took Muyi by surprise. Moyo may be disappointed if she knew the truth, but she had to tell her. Summoning up courage, she explained how she had bumped into the truth when they were 12. Surprisingly, Moyo did not feel hurt. "Don't beat up yourself, Muyi. I don't and will never hold it against you. I know you had my back, and I would do the same if I was in your shoes. You are the best thing that have come out of this whole mess. I always loved you as a sister, but finding out that you are truly my sister, that we have the same blood running through our veins, is way cooler. I love you, sister." The two young women hugged each other. "I love you too," Muyi replied, her voice thick with emotion. But somewhere at the back of her mind, Moyo's brain was working fast. Senator Bade would never go free with the things he had done to her. Moyo finally walked into her apartment. It had been a long, eventful day, and she was tired. All she needed now was a good night's rest. She would deal with her issues with her fiancé tomorrow. Then, she remembered her necklace. She was sure Senator Bade had it. "The pig," she thought to herself as she brought out her phone and sent him a short text message, which read, "I can't believe the things you did to a girl who called you father. But trust me, you won't get away with this one. I will make sure of that." And Muyi meant every word she said. No matter what it would take, she would bring Senator Bade down. The next morning, Irene had just settled at the dining table, ready to enjoy her quiet breakfast when the doorbell rang, disrupting the peaceful morning. The housekeeper, Efua, a cheerful young woman with a contagious smile, skipped to the door. She returned moments later with a serious expression, saying two men in uniform were at the door, requesting to speak with the madam of the house. Irene raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, calmly signaling for them to be shown into the living room. If she was curious about their visit, her face gave nothing away. She maintained the same poised, unreadable expression she always wore. As the two detectives entered, Irene greeted them with a polite smile. "Good day, officers. What can I do for you?" "Good morning, Mrs. Adeoti," one of them replied, flashing his badge. "We are detectives from the state CID. Apologies for disturbing you this early morning, but we need to speak with you about something urgent." Irene nodded, her smile still in place. "All right, I'm listening." The detectives exchanged a glance, carefully studying her reaction. One of them spoke again. "When was the last time you saw your husband?" At the mention of her husband, Irene's smile faded, replaced by a sharp look. "My husband? What is this about?" she asked, her tone now edged with impatience. The second detective took a step towards her, deciding to get straight to the point. "Your husband was found dead in his hotel room early this morning." The hotel management reported it to us, and all signs point to poisoning. He paused, watching for any change in her demeanor. So I'll ask again, when was the last time you saw your husband? For a moment, there was complete silence. Irene's face remained blank, showing no sign of shock, grief, or even surprise. Why does this sound like an accusation, detective? She asked, her voice calm but cold. Do you think I killed him? The first detective cleared his throat, adjusting his stance. We are not making any accusations yet, but given the events of last night, which are now all over the media, we have reason to question everyone close to Senator Badi. At this point, everyone is a suspect. Your son, in particular, made several incriminating statements during the party, and we've already taken him in for questioning as we speak. Irene's calm demeanor cracked. Her eyes darkened. Leave my son out of this, she said in a low, icy voice. He was found dead in his hotel room, wasn't he? Then find whoever it was that he spent the night with. My son had nothing to do with it, and neither did I. So unless you have anything else to say, I suggest you start looking in the right direction and leave my family alone. Her tone was cold, final, making it clear that the conversation was over as far as she was concerned. The detectives exchanged another glance, realizing that pushing any further at this moment would get them nowhere. They had come looking for answers, but had found only a wall of ice. Very well, Mrs. Adeoti, one of them said, nodding. We'll be in touch. Without another word, they turned and left, leaving Irene sitting where she was, her expression still unreadable. Muyi had just finished getting ready to face the day. She planned to visit her parents to check on them after the explosive events the night before. Then she would head over to her fiancé's place. Hopefully, she would sort out their unresolved issues. Taking one last glance at herself in the mirror and satisfied with her reflection, she picked up her bag and headed for the door. But as soon as she opened it, she was met with two uniformed men standing on her doorstep. Muyi instantly recognized them. They were detectives from the CID. But confusion swept over her. Good morning, detectives, she greeted them, her brow furrowing. To what do I owe this visit? Good morning, Barrister Badmus, one of them replied with a nod. We apologize for interrupting your day, but we need you to come with us to the station for a brief interrogation. Muyi's confusion deepened, and she tried to argue, hoping that they would at least tell her why she was needed. But she knew the law, and she knew resisting wouldn't help her situation. With a sigh, she grabbed her keys and followed them. Once they arrived at the station, the truth hit her like a brick. The detectives sat her down and explained what had happened to Senator Badi. We recovered his body this morning, one of them said gravely. His phones were missing, but we found something else. He pulled out a small clear evidence bag and dropped it onto the table in front of her. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the item inside. It was her diamond necklace, the one Ima had gifted her, the one she had been wearing at the party. Muyi's heart sank. She knew the implication of her necklace being found at the crime scene. She was a suspect. Panic bubbled inside her, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Detective, I can explain," she said quickly, her voice trembling slightly. "I lost this necklace last night. I did not even know it was missing until later. I have no reason, no motive to harm Senator Bade. Please, you have to believe me." The detective listened intently, his expression unreadable, as she recounted everything that had happened between her and the senator in the restroom. Her words came out in a rush, her heart pounding as she prayed her explanation would be enough to clear her name. Meanwhile, in another interrogation room, Wale sat across from another detective, his face flushed with frustration. "I swear I did not kill my father," he said, his voice rising in anger. "Yes, I said those things at the party, but it was just anger. I would never take his life. I did not do it, detective, I swear." The detective remained silent, his gaze fixed on Wale as he processed the outburst. Both Moyi and Wale were under immense pressure, each insisting they were innocent. The investigation had hit a frustrating dead end. Despite hours of questioning and sifting through clues, the detectives were no closer to finding the truth. Every single member of Senator Bade's family had a motive. Each one harbored their own grievances, their own reason to want him gone. But there was no hard evidence tying any of them to the murder. The detectives had their own suspicions as to the cause of death, but they needed confirmation. The autopsy report would take a few more days to be ready, and until then, they were stuck in limbo, unable to move forward. They had combed through the hotel room, dusting for fingerprints on every surface, but none of the prints matched anyone from the senator's family. The team had hoped that the hotel's CCTV footage might provide answers, and in a way, it did, but not enough. The grainy video showed Senator Bade arriving at the hotel, entering the reception with a mysterious woman. But the woman had been careful, extremely careful. She had skillfully avoided looking directly at the camera, keeping her face hidden from the shadows. It was clear that she had planned this moment with precision, knowing exactly how to avoid detection. Suddenly, a thought struck one of the detectives, named Chooks. He realized that tracing Senator Bade's last phone calls and locating his missing phone could provide crucial clues. Without wasting time, they contacted the senator's family, hoping to gather his phone numbers and other details. To their surprise, Irene, despite her cold demeanor, agreed to cooperate, giving them the much-needed breakthrough. Armed with the necessary information, they reached out to the specialized tech department within the police unit. The detectives felt a surge of determination as they began their search. The killer must have left a clue somewhere, they thought, their minds racing with possibilities. It did not take long before they found a lead. At exactly 9:10 p.m. on the night of the senator's death, he had made a phone call. The conversation had lasted just 30 seconds, but the number was one he frequently dialed. His call logs were full of interactions with it. Eagerly, the team dug deeper, and soon enough, they discovered the name registered to the phone number: Samantha Igodalo. The name did not ring any bell for the detectives. Was she a business associate, a lover, or something else? The detectives knew they needed to return to the senator's house and find out if anyone in his family recognized the name. Back at the senator's residence, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The walls seemed to hum with unspoken words, and the air felt heavy with the weight of unresolved emotions. Irene sat quietly, her face still void of any tears for her late husband. She had tried to cry, to feel something, but nothing came. Instead, she remained cold, her eyes distant. Bade had hurt her deeply, even in death. Dying in a hotel room, entering there with another woman barely an hour after an explosive confrontation with his own family. It was as though he had no respect for them at all. Irene clenched her fists under the table, fighting back the bitterness that had been growing inside her for years. How could he? After everything they had been through, after the endless humiliations, his final act was yet another betrayal. As for Muyo, she had locked herself in her room all day, avoiding the outside world. The news of the senator's death was everywhere, on every news channel, every blog, every gossip site. But what made it worse was the wild speculation that his family had a hand in his death. The bloggers were having a field day, and their main suspect was her brother, Wale. Muyo couldn't help but smile bitterly to herself. She knew Wale too well. Yes, he despised their father. That much was true, but he would never have gone as far as to kill him. If anyone had truly wished for the senator's death, it was her. But now, as she sat in the silence of her room, Muyo felt conflicted. She had often dreamed of a life without her father, imagining it would bring her peace and wash away the painful memories. Yet, now that he was gone, nothing had changed. The hollow ache in her chest was still there. His death had not healed her wounds or brought her the peace she had longed for. It made her question if his death had ever been the answer. Instead of relief, she was left with a strange emptiness, a void that no amount of revenge could fill. He was gone now, forever, oblivious to the pain he had caused her. At 5:15 p.m., the detectives returned to the senator's house. This time, it was Irene who answered the door. Her face was composed, her eyes cold but calm, as if she had already braced herself for whatever information they would bring. She invited them into the sitting room, the silence of the house making their footsteps echo louder than usual. Detective Ayo could not help but notice how empty the house felt. He glanced around, puzzled. "Where is your domestic staff?" he asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Irene looked at him, her expression steady. "My housekeeper, you met her this morning, went home to see her sick mother. As for the others, I sent them away. I just want to be alone with my family in a time like this," she explained, her voice calm, almost emotionless. The detectives exchanged a glance. They understood her need for privacy given the circumstances, but they also knew they were there for a reason. They had new information and it couldn't wait. "We understand," Detective Chooks said, pulling out a small notebook from his coat pocket. He flipped it open and passed it to Irene. "Does this name and phone number mean anything to you?" he asked, his tone careful. Irene took the notebook, her fingers trembling slightly as her eyes scanned the page. The moment her gaze fell on the name, her expression changed, her eyes widening with shock, her face going pale. She knew the name. "Bingo," Detective Chooks muttered under his breath, satisfied with the reaction. The phone number did not look familiar to her, but the name certainly did. Samantha Ighodalo. That wasn't just any random name. It was their housekeeper, Efua. Her full name was Efua Samantha Ighodalo. I know what you're thinking. It's the same question on the minds of Irene and the detectives. What is the relationship between the housekeeper and Senator Badmus? And why would she want him dead? One thing was clear to them now. There was no sick mother anywhere. Efua was on the run, and if they wanted to catch her, they needed to move fast. "Do you know where she lives or any member of her family at all?" Detective Chooks asked, his voice sharp with urgency. Irene paused, her mind racing as she tried to remember any details about her housekeeper's personal life. After a long moment, she shook her head slowly. "I really have no idea where she lives," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though admitting a fault she had not realized before. Detective Chooks stared at her, his eyes filled with disbelief and disappointment. "How long has she worked here, madam?" he asked, his voice now more pressing. Irene shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not exactly sure. 5 days a week for 3 or 4 years now, I think," she replied, her voice faltering. The detective's expression hardened, his confusion deepening. "So, someone works in your house for 3 to 4 years and you never cared enough to find out where she lives or if she has any family?" The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Before Irene could respond, a sharp beep cut through the tension. Detective Chooks reached for his pager, his face turning serious. "Excuse me," he said as he stepped out to take the call, leaving his partner behind to keep a close watch on Irene. In their line of work, nobody was above suspicion, not even a grieving widow. Moments later, the detective returned with a newfound intensity in his eyes. "Senator Bade's phones have been successfully traced," he announced. "We have an address. Let's hope she's not smart enough to get rid of them yet." Without wasting any time, they called for backup, and within minutes, a team of officers were ready. They moved swiftly, in the police van, on their way to the address they had gotten. As they neared the location, they had to ditch their police van to avoid drawing attention and changed into plain clothes. The narrow street was quiet with dim streetlights flickering and the moon shining above the sky. They blended in, walking casually but with purpose, hoping to gather information without causing a scene. The GPS tracker began to beep, guiding them closer to their target. The house they arrived at was old, a run-down bungalow with cracked walls. They approached cautiously, their eyes scanning every corner. At the first door, they knocked. And after a few seconds, an elderly woman, opened the door, her wrinkled face creased with confusion. "Good evening, Mama," they greeted, offering a polite nod. "Good evening," she replied, her voice weary. "How may I help you?" Detective Ayo cleared his throat, speaking gently to ease the woman's discomfort. "Please, Mama, we are looking for Efua. She is a bit fair-skinned and tall. She mentioned that she lives here." The old woman's face softened as recognition sparkled in her eyes. "Ah, Efua," she said, her lips curling into a small smile. "That's her room, over there," she said, pointing to a door at the end of the narrow hallway. "But I don't know if she's home right now." "Thank you, Mama," they said politely before heading to Efua's door. They knocked and knocked, but there was no answer. They knocked again, louder this time. Still silence. Something felt off. Suddenly, the sound of commotion erupted outside, followed by the sharp crack of a gunshot. The detectives immediately abandoned their knocking and bolted outside, their hearts pounding in their chests. What greeted them was chaos. There in the middle of the yard, Efua was on her knees, surrounded by the other officers, their guns drawn and aimed at her. Her eyes were wide with fear, her hands raised in surrender. She had tried to escape but was caught just in time. One of the officers had fired a warning shot and now she was cornered with no way out. Mama had lied to them. The detectives had no idea that the sweet old woman who stood at the door was actually Efua's grandmother. Her frail appearance and calm demeanor had fooled them. Her plan was to distract the officers while she gave her daughter enough time to escape through the back window. Little did they know that the compound was already surrounded. Efua had nowhere to go. Her desperate attempt to escape had only confirmed her involvement. As the officers marched Efua out of the compound in handcuffs, Mama collapsed on the ground, wailing in despair. Her cries echoed through the quiet neighborhood, but there was nothing more she could do. Efua's fate was now sealed. At exactly 9 p.m., Efua found herself sitting in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room at the police station. The air was thick with tension, and the detectives had no intention of wasting time. They had questions, lots of them, but there was one burning question they needed an answer to immediately. "Why did you kill Saint Zobade?" Detective Chooks asked, his voice stern and sharp. To their surprise, Efua burst into laughter. It was not the reaction they had expected from a woman in handcuffs. The room fell silent, the detectives staring at her in shock. "Is there something funny here?" Detective Ayo asked, his eyebrows furrowed. "Funny? Of course," Efua said, between laughs. "I'm just impressed, really. I had no idea the police could work this fast, and so efficiently too." She looked at the two detectives and gasped as if she had just remembered something. "Oh, wait. I almost forgot. He's Senator Bade, a top politician. Of course, his life would be top priority." Detective Chooks slammed his hand down on the table, his patience wearing thin. Enough! Stop playing games and answer the question. Why did you kill him? Uche's smile vanished instantly. She sat up straight, her handcuffed hands resting on the table in front of her. Her face grew serious, and her eyes darkened with a pain she had been carrying for years. Let me tell you a short story, detectives. She began, her voice low and steady. 23 years ago, my mother fell in love with a charming young man. He was handsome, well-spoken, and wealthy. He made her promises of a bright future. He came to our grandparents' home and told them he wanted to marry my mother. They welcomed him with open arms, and I was just a little girl, 9 years old. I was thrilled. Finally, I thought I would have a father. Efua paused, her eyes distant, as if she were reliving the memories. The detectives watched her closely, hanging on every word. But he was a lie, she continued, her voice now trembling slightly. He would visit us every day, bringing gifts for me, and telling my mother every sweet nonsense you can imagine. She was so happy, so in love. She thought he was the one. Then she got pregnant. That's when everything changed. He told her he wasn't ready to be a father. He had big political dreams, and a baby would slow him down. My mother, being so in love, listened to him. She terminated the pregnancy. But then, it happened again. She got pregnant a second time. And just like before, he said the exact same thing. But this time, my mother refused. They had a terrible fight and he stopped coming to the house. One day, he showed up again, all apologies and sweet words. He promised to take responsibility for the baby. My mother believed him. She forgave him and took him back, thinking things would be different. She did not know he had a plan. Efua's voice cracked and her eyes filled with tears. One night, my mother started bleeding badly. I was just a child. I did not know what to do. There was no one around to help us. I called him over and over and over again, but he never picked up. I ran to the neighbors, begging for help. But by the time we could get to the hospital, it was too late. She was gone. The room was deathly quiet. Even the detectives, who had heard countless tragic stories, were moved by the raw emotion in Efua's voice. Efua continued. I overheard the doctors talking to my grandparents. They said someone had been giving her something to terminate the pregnancy. I knew it was him. He killed my mother, and he never looked back. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as the detectives processed what they had just heard. They had expected a simple confession or a motive rooted in greed or passion. But this was something much deeper, a lifetime of pain wrapped up in a tragic story that had finally come full circle. My grandparents went to the police, hoping for justice. Efua continued, her voice quieter now. They wanted the man who had destroyed their daughter's life to be held accountable. But nothing was done. Nothing. You see, this man was wealthy. He had money, connections, and power, enough to make the case disappear, as if my mother's life did not matter at all. Her eyes darkened as she continued. As if that wasn't enough, my grandparents found out that he had a family, a wife, and a 3-year-old son. The betrayal broke them. My mother had believed his lies, thought he loved her, but in the end, she was just another piece of one of his many secrets. My grandfather couldn't take it. He passed away a few months after, leaving my grandmother and I to pick up the pieces. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence as Efwa leaned forward, her voice laced with bitterness. We never forgave him. His face, his smug, arrogant face never left my mind. I was just a little girl back then, but I made myself a promise. I swore that one day I would get revenge for my mother, and I did. She paused, letting her words sink in. The detectives watched her closely, intrigued by a story. For years, I followed his life from a distance. I watched as he climbed higher and higher in the political world, becoming more untouchable by the day. By then, an opportunity came, and I took a job as a housekeeper in his home. It was the perfect way to get close to him without raising suspicion. And getting into his bed? That was the easiest part. Senator Bade never met a woman he did not want to conquer. He chased anything in skirts. I see how he even looks at his daughter. There's something off there, I'm sure of it. Detective Chooks flinched slightly, but said nothing. Once I was in his bed, she continued, I had him. He trusted me, thought he had me under his thumb. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. I'm sure you know the rest of the story, Efwa said with a grim smile as she leaned back in her chair. The room fell into a heavy silence. The detectives exchanged glances, processing everything she had just revealed. This was not just a simple case of murder. It was a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and justice that had been denied for far too long. So what made you decide the time was right? Detective Chooks asked, his voice quieter than before. Efwa did not hesitate. The best time to strike is when there is chaos, she said. That night, emotions were running high. The family was in disarray. Everyone was on edge. If he turned up dead, it would be easy to pin it on them. I thought I was smart enough, considering how long it took me to, plan this whole thing. But I guess I wasn't, since I'm sitting here now. Detective Chooks leaned in, his gaze steady. How do you feel right now, knowing that the law must take its course? You took a life, Efwa. Efwa's calm demeanor shattered as she fired back, her voice full of fury. He took my mother's life and no one did anything about it. Where was the law then? You have no proof of that. Chooks replied evenly, trying to keep his voice calm. I don't need proof, Efwa said, her voice steadying again. I know what he did, and I will go down happily, knowing I took justice. I fought for my mother, and in the end, I won. A few months later, Efwa Samantha Ighodalo stood in court, facing the judge. Her hands were shackled, but her expression was calm. She had refused a lawyer and pleaded guilty to the charges, making the trial swift and straightforward. Miss Efwa Ighodalo, the judge said, her voice heavy with the weight of her words. Your story is indeed tragic. But without sentiment, the fact remains that you took the law into your own hands. You took a life, and for that, there are consequences. I hereby sentence you to 30 years in prison with hard labor, without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, Efwa turned to glance at the back of the courtroom. Her grandmother was there, sobbing uncontrollably, her frail body shaking with grief. For the first time, Efwa felt a wave of real sorrow crash over her. Her own tears, long held back, began to fall. She had fought for justice, fought for her mother's memory, but as she watched her grandmother wail in anguish, a part of her wished she had found another way. Perhaps there could have been a different way to fight back, a better way for her to find peace. But the truth is, she had fought the only way she knew how to, and now she had to pay the price for her victory. As the guards led her away, Efwa wiped her tears, her heart heavy with the knowledge that though she had won her battle, the cost had been far greater than she had ever imagined. When Irene heard Efwa's confession, her heart went out to the poor girl. She was finally able to put the puzzle pieces together. When Bade had left her so many years ago, it was to be with another woman. And when things had gone bad, he ran back to her, and she had believed and taken him back. Something became very clear to her. Her husband had lived a very disgraceful and wicked life. Her family had gone through a very rough patch, an experience that would remain in their memories forever. But she was positive that they would find a way to heal as long as they remained together. And no matter what anyone thought, she would maintain her stance. Senator Bade had reaped exactly what he had sown. Hey lovers! If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you're new here, welcome to our community. This is actually the first time I'll be creating a story like this, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you have not done so already, please hit the subscribe button, and to support the growth of our community, please give this video a big thumbs up. If you enjoyed this story and you'd like to see more stories like this, please let me know in the comment section. If you have learned something from this story, I want to know what you have learned in the comment section. If you know someone who loves listening to stories like this, do not hesitate to share. I'll take my leave now, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.